The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the dusty general store in Tulsa, Indian Territory, and Beatrice Vale's hands trembled as she clutched the worn leather satchel containing every possession she owned, her heart pounding with the certainty that the man waiting inside would take one look at her scarred face and send her right back to Missouri. It was July 1889, and the heat pressed down on the small frontier town like a heavy blanket. Beatrice stepped down from the coach, her legs unsteady after 3 days of travel. The driver handed down her single trunk without meeting her eyes, a reaction she had grown accustomed to over the past 2 years. She touched the puckered skin along her left cheek and jaw, a reminder of the fire that had claimed her parents and left her marked forever. She had answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride, sent by a cattle rancher named Preston Everett who needed a wife to help run his homestead. In her letter, she had been honest about the scars, expecting silence in return. Instead, Preston had written back within 2 weeks, saying that he valued honesty and hard work above all else, and that beauty was fleeting but character was eternal. Still, Beatrice could not shake the dread that his words on paper would not match his reaction in person. The general store was dim and cool inside, a welcome relief from the blazing sun. A woman behind the counter looked up, her weathered face breaking into a smile. "You must be Miss Vale. Preston said you would be arriving today." Beatrice nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, madam." "Is Mr. Everett here?" "He is just finishing some business at the feed store. He should be here any moment." The woman came around the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. "I am Martha Quinn. My husband owns this store. Preston is a good man, one of the best in these parts. You are fortunate." Before Beatrice could respond, the door swung open and a man stepped inside. He was tall, perhaps 30 years old, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His clothes were clean but worn, the shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. But it was his eyes that caught Beatrice's attention, warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners as he smiled. Preston Everett removed his hat and held it in his hands, his gaze finding Beatrice immediately. She braced herself for the moment his expression would change, for the flash of disappointment or worse, disgust. But as his eyes traveled over her face, taking in the scars that ran from her left temple down to her jaw, his smile only deepened. "Miss Vale," he said, his voice warm and genuine. "I am so glad you made it safely. The journey from Missouri can be rough this time of year." Beatrice stood frozen, unable to comprehend his reaction. "Mr. Everett, I thought perhaps you might want to reconsider now that you have seen me in person." Preston's brow furrowed in confusion. "Reconsider? Why would I do that, my face?" she whispered, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "The scars are worse than I described in my letter." He stepped closer, his expression serious now. "Miss Vale, those scars tell me you survived something terrible. They tell me you are strong. That is all I need to know." He extended his hand to her. "If you are still willing, I would be honored if you would come to my ranch and see if it might suit you for a home." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes as she placed her hand in his. His grip was firm but gentle, calloused from hard work. "I would like that very much." The ride to Preston's ranch took nearly an hour, the wagon rolling over dirt roads that cut through sprawling grasslands dotted with cattle. Preston kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the land. His ranch, the Double E, covered nearly 500 acres. He ran cattle and bred horses with the help of 3 hired hands who lived in the bunkhouse. "I built the main house 3 years ago," Preston explained as they crested a hill and the homestead came into view. "It is not fancy, but it is solid. 4 rooms right now, though I always planned to add on when the time came." The house was indeed simple, a sturdy wooden structure with a wide front porch and a stone chimney. But it looked well maintained, with flowers growing in boxes beneath the windows and a vegetable garden thriving to one side. Beyond it stood a large barn, corrals, and the smaller bunkhouse. Preston helped Beatrice down from the wagon, and she noticed how careful he was not to grab her waist or touch her inappropriately. Everything about his demeanor was respectful, almost courtly despite his rough cowboy exterior. Inside, the house was neat and clean, though clearly lacking a woman's touch. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace and simple furniture. Preston showed her to one of the bedrooms, a small but pleasant space with a bed covered in a colorful quilt. "This will be your room until we are properly married," Preston said, setting her trunk down gently. "I know we agreed to marry upon your arrival, but I want you to be certain. Take as much time as you need to decide if I am what you want. There is no pressure." Beatrice looked at this man who had welcomed her with such kindness, who looked at her without flinching, and felt something loosen in her chest. "You have already shown me more consideration than anyone has in 2 years, Mr. Everett. I came prepared to marry you, and I see no reason to delay if you are still willing." Preston's face lit up with a joy so genuine it made Beatrice's breath catch. "Then we will go into town tomorrow and speak with Reverend Morrison, but please call me Preston. We are to be husband and wife after all. Then you must call me Beatrice, or Bea if you prefer." That evening, Preston introduced Beatrice to his 3 ranch hands. There was Carlos Mendoza, a lean Mexican man in his 40s who had worked cattle his entire life. Sam Tucker, a young black man who had come west after the war to find freedom and opportunity. And Frank Donnelly, an Irish immigrant with a quick wit and capable hands. All 3 men greeted Beatrice with respect and genuine warmth, following Preston's lead in treating her scars as unremarkable. Over dinner, which Beatrice insisted on preparing despite Preston's protests, the men regaled her with stories of life on the ranch. She learned that Preston had come to Indian Territory 5 years earlier, claiming land during the land run and building everything from the ground up. He had a reputation for fairness and honesty, for treating his workers well, and his livestock better than many men treated their families. Preston once spent 3 days tracking a lost calf in a blizzard, Sam said, shaking his head in admiration. Nearly froze to death himself, but he brought that calf back to its mama. Preston waved off the praise, looking embarrassed. Any decent rancher would do the same. That calf represented an investment. "It was a runt that probably would not have survived anyway," Carlos interjected with a knowing smile. But Preston does not like to admit he has a soft heart. Watching Preston interact with his men, seeing the easy camaraderie and mutual respect, Beatrice felt her initial nervousness begin to fade. This was a good man, perhaps the best she had ever met. After the hands returned to the bunkhouse, Preston and Beatrice sat on the front porch, watching the sun sink below the horizon in a blaze of orange and pink. The evening air was finally cooling, bringing relief from the day's heat. "I want to be honest with you about something," Preston said quietly, his hands clasped between his knees. "I have been lonely out here. Building this ranch, working from dawn to dusk, it is fulfilling work, but at the end of the day, the house feels empty. I placed that advertisement because I want a partner, someone to share this life with. I hope that we can build something real together, not just a marriage of convenience." Beatrice studied his profile in the fading light. "I want that too. I will not pretend I came here for love. I came because I had nowhere else to go, no other prospects. But I am a hard worker, Preston, and I keep my word. I will do everything in my power to be a good wife to you." Preston turned to look at her, his eyes searching her face. "Can I ask what happened?" "You do not have to tell me if it is too painful." Beatrice took a deep breath, steadying herself against the familiar wave of grief. 2 years ago, our house caught fire in the middle of the night. My father was a banker in Springfield, Missouri. We lived in a nice house on a nice street. I woke to smoke and flames already consuming the hallway. I tried to reach my parents' room, but a burning beam fell across the doorway. The fire caught my nightgown, my hair. Her hand moved unconsciously to her scarred cheek. A neighbor pulled me out through my bedroom window. My parents did not make it. Preston's hand covered hers, warm and solid. "I am so sorry, Beatrice. After I recovered, I found that my father had debts I knew nothing about. Everything was sold to pay them. I had an aunt who took me in, but she made it clear I was a burden. When she began pressuring me to accept a proposal from a man 3 times my age who wanted a nursemaid more than a wife, I knew I had to leave." Beatrice met Preston's eyes. "Your advertisement seemed like an answered prayer." "I am glad you found it," Preston said simply, "and I am glad you came." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear overhead, neither feeling the need to fill the quiet with unnecessary words. The next morning, Preston and Beatrice rode into Tulsa in the wagon. The town was busier than it had been the previous day, with people going about their business, cowboys riding in from nearby ranches, and families doing their shopping. Preston guided the wagon to a small white church at the edge of town, where Reverend Morrison welcomed them warmly. The Reverend was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He spoke with Beatrice privately, ensuring she was entering the marriage of her own free will and understood the commitment she was making. Satisfied with her answers, he agreed to perform the ceremony that very afternoon. Preston left Beatrice at the general store with Martha Quinn, pressing money into her hand despite her protests. "Buy yourself a new dress for the wedding," he insisted, "and anything else you might need. I will return in 2 hours to collect you." Martha helped Beatrice select a beautiful dress in a soft blue fabric that brought out the color of her eyes. It was simple but well made, with delicate buttons down the front and lace at the collar and cuffs. They also purchased fabric for more practical dresses, undergarments, a new pair of boots, and various sundries Beatrice would need. As Martha wrapped the purchases, she smiled at Beatrice. "Preston has been alone too long. I am glad he found someone, and I am especially glad he found you." "You do not even know me," Beatrice said, surprised. "I know you came all this way on faith. I know Preston has been smiling more in the last day than I have seen in months. That tells me everything I need to know." Martha patted Beatrice's hand. "You will be good for each other." Preston returned exactly 2 hours later, having purchased a new shirt and had his hair trimmed at the barber. He looked nervous and hopeful as Beatrice emerged from the back room in her new dress, and the expression on his face made her feel beautiful for the first time since the fire. The wedding was small and simple, with Martha and her husband serving as witnesses along with Preston's ranch hands. Reverend Morrison spoke about love, commitment, and partnership, about building a life together through both good times and hard. When the moment came to exchange vows, Preston's voice was steady and sure as he promised to love, honor, and cherish Beatrice. Her own voice shook slightly, but she meant every word with her whole heart. Preston kissed her softly when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, a brief, tender press of lips that promised more to come. Beatrice felt heat spread through her body at the contact, surprised by the strength of her reaction. They celebrated with dinner at the small hotel restaurant, the only proper eating establishment in Tulsa. Carlos played a battered guitar while Sam sang in a rich baritone, and even Frank, usually so serious, told jokes that had everyone laughing. It was not the grand wedding Beatrice had once imagined as a girl, but it was warm and genuine, filled with people who cared. As the sun began to set, Preston and Beatrice said goodbye to their small wedding party and headed back to the ranch. The ride seemed both too long and too short, Beatrice's nerves increasing with each passing mile. She was a married woman now, and tonight would be her wedding night. She knew what that meant, though her knowledge was mostly theoretical, gleaned from whispered conversations with married friends before the fire. Preston seemed to sense her nervousness because he kept up a steady stream of gentle conversation, pointing out the stars beginning to appear overhead and telling her stories about the various landmarks they passed. By the time they reached the ranch, Beatrice felt calmer, more centered. Inside the house, Preston lit the lamps while Beatrice stood uncertainly in the main room. When he turned to her, his expression was tender. "Beatrice, I want you to know that we do not have to do anything you are not ready for tonight. This is all new, and I do not want you to feel pressured." Beatrice appreciated his consideration, but she also felt a pull toward this man who had shown her such kindness. "I am nervous," she admitted, "but I am also your wife. I want to be your wife in every sense of the word." Preston crossed the room to her, taking her hands in his. "Then we will go slow, and you will tell me if anything frightens you or if you want to stop. I promise to be gentle." He was true to his word. Preston led her to his bedroom, which would now be their bedroom, and undressed her slowly, pressing kisses to each new bit of skin he revealed. When he reached the scars that covered her left shoulder and upper arm, he traced them gently with his fingers before placing tender kisses along their length. "You are beautiful," he whispered against her skin, and the conviction in his voice made Beatrice believe it might be true. She helped him out of his own clothes, exploring the hard planes of his body, the muscles earned from years of physical labor. He was patient with her, guiding her gently, teaching her the ways of physical love with consideration and tenderness. There was some pain, as she had been warned there might be, but Preston was so careful, so attentive to her responses, that the discomfort soon gave way to pleasure. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Preston's arm around her waist and her head resting on his chest. Beatrice could hear his heartbeat beneath her ear, steady and strong. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For making me feel safe, for making me feel wanted." Preston pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You are wanted, Beatrice, more than you know." The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Beatrice rose early each morning to prepare breakfast for Preston and the ranch hands, finding satisfaction in the simple act of feeding hungry men who appreciated her cooking. After the men headed out to their various tasks, she would tackle the housework, tend the vegetable garden, and begin preparing the midday meal. Preston always returned to the house at noon, no matter how pressing the work might be. They would eat together, talking about their mornings, and he would often steal a kiss before heading back out. Those kisses became less tentative as the days passed, growing into something heated and passionate that sometimes led them back to the bedroom for a stolen hour of intimacy. Beatrice learned the rhythms of ranch life, the constant cycle of work that varied with the seasons but never truly stopped. She learned to recognize the different calls of the cattle, to tell when a storm was approaching by the behavior of the horses, to read the land in the same way Preston and his men did. In the evenings, Preston taught her to ride. He was patient as she learned to handle the gentle mare he had chosen for her, a dappled gray named Daisy who had a sweet temperament. At first, Beatrice was terrified, but Preston never pushed her beyond her comfort zone, always encouraging but never demanding. "You are doing wonderfully," he would say, riding beside her on his large bay gelding. "You have a natural seat." One evening, about 6 weeks after their wedding, they rode out to check on a herd in the far pasture. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, and Beatrice felt a sense of peace she had not known since before the fire. She looked over at Preston, at his strong profile outlined against the colorful sky, and realized with a start that she was falling in love with him. The realization must have shown on her face because Preston turned to look at her, a question in his eyes. "What is it?" "I am happy," Beatrice said simply. "Truly happy." Preston's answering smile was radiant. He dismounted and came to help her down from Daisy, his hands lingering at her waist. "I am happy too, happier than I have ever been." He kissed her there in the fading light, with the cattle lowing softly in the background and the evening breeze cooling their skin. Beatrice wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the emotion flooding through her, trying to convey without words what she was still too shy to say out loud. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Beatrice. I know it has not been long, but I cannot keep it inside any longer. I love you." "I love you too," Beatrice whispered, her heart soaring. "I think I have been falling in love with you since the moment you looked at me without flinching." They made love there in the grass beneath the darkening sky, unhurried and tender, expressing with their bodies what their hearts had finally spoken aloud. As summer gave way to fall, Beatrice settled more deeply into her role as Preston's wife and the mistress of the Double E Ranch. She proved herself invaluable in countless ways, from managing the household finances to helping Preston with the bookkeeping for the ranch. Her education, received at a proper finishing school before the fire, served her well in ways her aunt had never imagined. She also proved to have a gift with animals. A young calf, rejected by its mother, thrived under Beatrice's care. She fed it with a bottle every few hours, speaking to it gently, and the calf followed her around like a devoted dog. Preston teased her about her new pet, but she could see the affection in his eyes when he watched her with the animal. In October, a severe storm swept through the territory, bringing driving rain and fierce winds. The storm hit just as Preston and the hands were returning from moving cattle to higher ground. One of the horses spooked in the wind, throwing Frank and breaking his leg in 2 places. Beatrice sprang into action, helping Preston and the others get Frank into the house. She had Carlo's ride to fetch the doctor from Tulsa, while she made Frank as comfortable as possible and did her best to stabilize the leg. The doctor, when he finally arrived 3 hours later, was impressed with her work. "You have steady hands and a level head," Dr. Phillips said as he finished setting the bone properly. "Have you had medical training?" "No, but I read everything I can find," Beatrice admitted. "I had a book on basic medicine I purchased in Missouri. I tried to follow its instructions." Frank was confined to bed rest for 6 weeks, which meant they were down 1 worker during the crucial fall season. Beatrice surprised everyone by suggesting she could help with some of the lighter ranch work. Preston was hesitant, worried about her safety, but Beatrice was insistent. "I can mend fences, help sort cattle, do many things that do not require heavy lifting or dangerous work," she argued. "You need the help and I am capable of providing it." Reluctantly, Preston agreed, and Beatrice proved herself more than capable. She worked alongside the men, learning quickly and never complaining about the long hours or physical demands. Preston watched her with a mixture of pride and admiration, falling even more deeply in love with this woman who continually surprised him. One afternoon, as they worked together to repair a section of fence, Preston paused to watch Beatrice expertly twist wire around a post. Her face was flushed with exertion, her hair escaping from its braid, and she had never looked more beautiful to him. "What are you staring at?" she asked, catching him watching. "My wife," he said simply. "My amazing, capable, beautiful wife." Beatrice rolled her eyes but smiled, her cheeks darkening further. "Flattery will not get this fence repaired any faster. Maybe not, but it might earn me a kiss." "You do not need to earn what is freely given," Beatrice said, crossing to him and pressing a quick kiss to his lips. "Now get back to work, cowboy." Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow in late November. The work on the ranch shifted to caring for the animals through the harsh weather, breaking ice on water troughs and ensuring the cattle had access to food. It was hard, cold work, but Beatrice never complained. Christmas approached, and Beatrice wanted to do something special. She spent her evenings secretly working on gifts for Preston and the ranch hands. For Preston, she embroidered a shirt with intricate designs along the collar and cuffs. For each of the hands, she knitted warm scarves in different colors. Preston, meanwhile, was working on his own secret project in the barn workshop. On Christmas morning, he presented Beatrice with a beautiful jewelry box he had crafted from cherry wood, with her name carved elegantly into the lid. "Preston, it is beautiful," Beatrice breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "You made this yourself." "I wanted you to have something special, something made just for you," Preston said, looking pleased by her reaction. "Open it." Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a delicate gold locket. Beatrice opened it with trembling fingers to find a tiny photograph of Preston on one side. "The other side is for our children," Preston said softly, "when we have them." Beatrice threw her arms around his neck, tears streaming down her face. "I love it. I love you." They celebrated Christmas with the ranch hands, sharing a feast Beatrice had spent days preparing. The house was filled with laughter, warmth, and the kind of contentment that came from good food and better company. As Beatrice looked around the table at these men who had become like family, with Preston at her side, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the unexpected blessings her life had brought. That night, as snow fell softly outside their bedroom window, Preston made love to Beatrice with exquisite tenderness, whispering words of love and devotion against her skin. Afterward, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Beatrice felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. Winter deepened, bringing more snow and bitter cold. In early January, a blizzard struck with little warning, catching Preston and Sam out on the range checking on cattle. Beatrice watched anxiously from the window as the sky darkened and the wind picked up, knowing they should have been back hours ago. Carlos wanted to go search for them, but Beatrice refused to let him venture out into the storm. "We cannot risk losing anyone else," she said firmly, though her heart was pounding with fear. "They know this land. They will find shelter and wait it out." The blizzard raged for 2 days. Beatrice barely slept, starting at every sound, praying desperately for Preston's safe return. When the storm finally cleared, she and Carlos rode out immediately, following the direction Preston and Sam had gone. They found them 3 miles from the ranch house, holed up in a small line shack with a dozen head of cattle they had managed to drive there for shelter. Both men were cold and exhausted but unharmed. Beatrice nearly fell off her horse in her haste to reach Preston, throwing herself into his arms with a sob of relief. "I thought I had lost you," she choked out, clinging to him. Preston held her tight, his own voice rough with emotion. "I am sorry I worried you. We could not make it back before the storm hit full force. I hated knowing you were home frightened. You are here now. That is all that matters." The experience shook them both, a stark reminder of how quickly disaster could strike in this harsh land. That night, Preston held Beatrice close, unable to let her go even in sleep. "I cannot imagine my life without you," he whispered into her hair. "Before you came, I thought I was content, but now I know I was just existing, not truly living. You have given me purpose beyond this ranch, beyond the work. You have given me joy." "You have given me the same," Beatrice replied, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "You gave me a home when I had none, love when I thought I was unlovable. You looked past my scars and saw me. Those scars are part of you, part of your story. They do not diminish your beauty. They add to it because they show your strength." Preston tilted her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "You are the strongest person I know, Beatrice Everett." Spring arrived eventually, as it always did, bringing new life to the land. The snow melted, revealing fresh green grass beneath. Calves were born, filling the air with their bleating. The ranch came alive with activity after the quiet months of winter. In early March, Beatrice began to suspect she might be pregnant. Her monthly courses had stopped, and she felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with work. She kept her suspicions to herself for a few weeks, wanting to be certain before telling Preston. When Dr. Phillips confirmed her condition during a routine visit to town, Beatrice could barely contain her excitement. She planned an elaborate dinner for that evening, preparing all of Preston's favorite foods. When they sat down to eat, just the two of them, Preston looked at her with amused suspicion. "All right, what is the special occasion?" "It is not our anniversary, not my birthday." "What are you up to?" Beatrice could not keep the smile from her face. Can a wife not cook a nice dinner for her husband without being suspected of ulterior motives? She can, but you are practically glowing. Something has you excited. Preston reached across the table to take her hand. "Tell me." "We are going to have a baby," Beatrice said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Dr. Phillips confirmed it this afternoon. "I am about 3 months along, which means the baby should arrive in early September." The expression on Preston's face was one Beatrice would treasure forever. Pure joy, wonder, and love all mixed together. He stood so quickly his chair fell over backward, coming around the table to pull her into his arms. "A baby," he breathed, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Beatrice asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. Happy does not begin to cover it. I am elated, thrilled, overwhelmed in the best possible way. Preston kissed her deeply, then dropped to his knees and pressed a gentle kiss to her stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your papa loves you already." Beatrice ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was the family she had thought she would never have, the happiness she had stopped believing in. And it was all real, all hers. The ranch hands were delighted by the news, each offering congratulations and promising to help however they could. Frank, fully recovered from his broken leg, immediately began crafting a cradle in the workshop. Carlos announced he would teach the child to ride as soon as it was old enough. Sam started knitting tiny booties, a skill he had learned from his grandmother. As Beatrice's pregnancy progressed, Preston became almost comically protective. He refused to let her do any heavy work, worried constantly about her health, and nearly drove her mad with his hovering. "Preston, I am pregnant, not made of glass," Beatrice protested one afternoon when he insisted she rest instead of helping with the laundry. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. But you are not just any woman." "You are my woman, carrying my child," Preston countered, gently pushing her toward a chair. "Please, let me take care of you." Beatrice softened at the genuine concern in his voice. "I know you worry, but I need to stay active. Dr. Phillips said light activity is good for the baby and for me. I promise I will not overdo it, but I cannot spend the next 6 months sitting idle." They reached a compromise. Beatrice continued with her normal household tasks, but left anything strenuous to others. Preston made sure she ate well, rested regularly, and saw the doctor monthly. His attentiveness was actually quite sweet, even if it was sometimes overwhelming. In May, they received word that a new family had settled on the neighboring property, the first near neighbors they had had. Preston and Beatrice rode over to welcome them, bringing fresh bread and preserves as a greeting gift. The Harrington family consisted of Robert and Helen, both in their early 30s, and their 3 young children. Helen was immediately drawn to Beatrice, thrilled to have another woman nearby. The two became fast friends, with Helen offering advice and support for Beatrice's pregnancy, having been through it 3 times herself. The key is to rest when you can, eat when you are hungry, and ignore at least half of what people tell you, Helen said with a laugh during one of their visits. Everyone has opinions on pregnancy and childbirth, but every woman's experience is different. Having Helen's friendship made the remaining months of pregnancy much easier. The 2 women visited regularly, sharing recipes, sewing baby clothes, and simply enjoying each other's company. Robert and Preston also formed a friendship, sometimes collaborating on larger projects that required more manpower. Summer heat descended on the territory, making Beatrice increasingly uncomfortable as her belly swelled. Preston rigged a cooling system on the porch using wet canvas and the breeze, creating a shaded area where Beatrice could sit comfortably, even on the hottest days. One evening in late August, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Beatrice felt the baby kick strongly. She grabbed Preston's hand and placed it on her stomach. His eyes widened as he felt the movement beneath his palm. "That is our baby," he said in wonder. "Our child is in there, alive and moving." "Very much alive," Beatrice said with a laugh, "especially at night when I am trying to sleep." Preston pressed his face close to her belly. "Listen here, little one. Your mama needs her rest. Try to do your dancing during the day, all right?" The baby kicked again, right where Preston's cheek rested, making him laugh with delight. Beatrice watched her husband commune with their unborn child and felt a wave of love so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Everything she had been through, all the pain and loss, had led her to this moment, this man, this life. She would not change a single thing. Labor began on a cool September morning, 2 weeks earlier than expected. Beatrice woke to cramping pains and knew immediately what was happening. She gently shook Preston awake. "It is time," she said quietly. Preston was instantly alert, though his face paled. "Time, as in the baby is coming." "The baby is coming," Beatrice confirmed, breathing through another contraction. Preston sprang into action, sending Sam racing to town for Dr. Phillips and Helen, while he helped Beatrice into a clean nightgown and made her as comfortable as possible. Carlos boiled water and gathered clean towels, while Frank hovered anxiously, asking repeatedly if there was anything he could do. Helen arrived first, bringing her calm competence and experience. She took charge immediately, assessing Beatrice's progress and assuring Preston that everything was proceeding normally. "First babies often take their time," Helen said. "Settle in. This could be a while." It was indeed a while. Labor continued through the day and into the evening. Preston stayed by Beatrice's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. When the pain became intense, he let her grip his hand so hard she left bruises, never once complaining. Dr. Phillips arrived in the early evening, examined Beatrice, and confirmed that all was well. "You are doing beautifully, my dear. Just a bit longer now." As the sun set and lamps were lit throughout the house, Beatrice's labor intensified. Preston supported her through each contraction, his presence giving her strength when she felt she had none left. Finally, as the clock struck 9, Dr. Phillips announced it was time to push. The next hour was the hardest of Beatrice's life, but every time she felt she could not continue, she would look into Preston's eyes and find the strength to try again. And then, finally, a baby's cry filled the room, strong and healthy. "It is a boy," Dr. Phillips announced, placing the squalling infant on Beatrice's chest. "A beautiful, perfect boy." Beatrice looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and flailing fists, and felt a love unlike anything she had ever known. Preston leaned over them both, tears streaming down his face as he gently touched the baby's downy head. "Hello, son," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Welcome to the world." They named him Peter Robert Everett, honoring both his father and their neighbor who had become such a good friend. Peter was a healthy baby with a strong set of lungs and his father's dark hair. Preston was completely besotted, spending hours just watching the baby sleep, marveling at every tiny feature. "I cannot believe we made this perfect little person," Preston said one night, holding Peter carefully in his large hands. "He is so small, so helpless. How do we keep him safe together?" Beatrice said, watching her two favorite people in the world. "We figure it out together." The first months of parenthood were exhausting but wonderful. Peter was a good baby overall, though he had his father's stubborn streak and his mother's determination. The ranch hands treated him like a beloved nephew, taking turns helping care for him and spoiling him thoroughly. Frank finished the cradle he had been working on, an elaborate affair with carved horses running along the sides. Carlos taught Peter songs in Spanish, singing to him in a rich voice that always seemed to soothe the baby. Sam knitted endless tiny clothes, each more elaborate than the last. As winter approached again, the household settled into new rhythms that accommodated their newest member. Beatrice had worried she might struggle to balance her ranch duties with motherhood, but she found the rest of the household more than willing to adjust to make things easier. Preston insisted on handling the night feedings when Peter woke, bringing the baby to Beatrice to nurse, and then walking him back to sleep afterward. "You do so much during the day," he said when Beatrice protested. "Let me do this." On Peter's first Christmas, just 3 months old, the house was filled with even more joy than the year before. Preston had continued his woodworking, crafting a beautiful set of blocks for his son to grow into. Beatrice had embroidered a special blanket with Peter's name and birth date. As they sat together on Christmas evening, Peter sleeping peacefully in his father's arms, Beatrice reflected on how much her life had changed in just a year and a half. She had arrived in Tulsa expecting rejection, prepared for disappointment. Instead, she had found acceptance, love, and a family beyond her wildest dreams. "What are you thinking about?" Preston asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "How blessed I am. How grateful." Beatrice moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder and placing her hand gently on Peter's back. "A year and a half ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never be happy again. And now I have everything I could ever want. A husband I love more than I thought possible, a beautiful son, a home that truly feels like mine, friends who have become family." Beatrice tilted her face up to kiss Preston's jaw. "You gave me all of that." "We gave it to each other," Preston corrected gently. "You brought life to this house, to my heart. Before you came, everything was gray and empty. You painted it all in color." As the months passed, and Peter grew, the ranch prospered as well. Preston and Robert Harrington partnered on a breeding program for horses that proved quite successful. The Double E Ranch became known throughout the territory for quality livestock and fair dealing. Beatrice took on more of the business side of the ranch, her education and natural aptitude for numbers making her invaluable. She maintained meticulous records, negotiated contracts, and managed the finances with skill that impressed even the most skeptical businessmen in Tulsa. The fact that she did all this while raising a young child only added to her reputation as a remarkably capable woman. On their second wedding anniversary, Preston took Beatrice into town for a special dinner, leaving Peter in Helen's capable care. It was the first time they had been alone together since Peter's birth, and it felt almost strange to have just each other's company. Over dinner at the hotel restaurant, Preston reached across the table to take Beatrice's hand. "I have been thinking," he said, "about expanding the house. Adding on those extra rooms I always planned for. We will need more space as Peter grows and perhaps for future children." Beatrice smiled. "Future children? You are already thinking about more, are you not?" Preston's eyes twinkled. "I rather enjoyed the process of making Peter. I would not mind trying again." "Preston Everett," Beatrice said, laughing and blushing at the same time. "You are incorrigible, you love it." "I do," Beatrice admitted. "I love you, and yes, I would like more children when the time is right." The time turned out to be right sooner than expected. Just a few months later, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. Peter was barely a year old, and the thought of managing two small children was somewhat daunting, but she and Preston were both thrilled. This pregnancy was easier in some ways, as Beatrice knew what to expect and felt less anxious. But it was also harder because she was caring for an active toddler while dealing with morning sickness and fatigue. Preston hired a young woman from town, Sarah Mitchell, to help with Peter and the household tasks a few days a week, giving Beatrice time to rest. The house expansion Preston had planned moved forward quickly, with Robert and his older son helping with the construction. They added 2 new bedrooms, a proper dining room, and a larger kitchen. By the time the baby was due to arrive in late spring, the house was transformed into a true family home. Peter's baby sister arrived on a beautiful May morning, her birth much quicker and easier than her brother's had been. They named her Alina Grace, and she had her mother's delicate features and her father's warm brown eyes. Peter was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to touch her constantly and bringing her his favorite toys. Preston was once again reduced to emotional mush, cradling his daughter with infinite gentleness and declaring her the most beautiful baby girl ever born. "You said the same thing about Peter," Beatrice teased, watching her husband with their daughter. "And I was right then too," Preston insisted. "I simply make beautiful babies." "We make beautiful babies," Beatrice corrected. "That too." Life with 2 small children was chaotic but full of love and laughter. The house that had once seemed too big and too quiet was now filled with the sounds of children playing, babies crying, and family living. It was exactly what Preston had dreamed of when he built it. As Alina's first birthday approached, Beatrice found herself pregnant yet again. This third pregnancy was unexpected but welcomed, though she joked that Preston needed to give her body a rest. "I cannot help it if you are irresistible," Preston said, pulling her close despite her swollen belly. "Besides, you want a large family. We are working on it." Their third child, another boy they named Thomas Henry, arrived just after Alina's first birthday. The house was now truly full, with 3 children under the age of 3 keeping everyone busy from dawn to dusk. Sarah became a permanent fixture in the household, helping Beatrice manage the chaos with good humor and patience. The ranch hands were pressed into service as well, each developing special bonds with the children. Carlos taught them Spanish words, Sam played endless games of peek-a-boo, and Frank carved toys in the workshop. Preston expanded the ranch operations to provide better for his growing family. He purchased additional land and increased the cattle herd. The Double E became one of the most successful ranches in the territory, known for quality livestock and innovative breeding practices. Through it all, Preston and Beatrice's love only deepened. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone when the children napped or were occupied elsewhere. Their physical connection remained strong, passionate, and tender by turns. "I fall more in love with you every day," Preston told her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching their 3 children play in the yard under Sarah's watchful eye. "I did not know it was possible to love someone this much." "I feel the same," Beatrice said, leaning into his embrace. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I get to wake up next to you every morning, that these beautiful children are ours." "Believe it," Preston said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "This is real, and it is forever." As the years passed, the Everett children grew healthy and strong. Peter developed his father's love for ranching, following Preston around from the time he could walk and learning everything he could about cattle and horses. Eleanor was gentle and nurturing, collecting every stray animal she found and nursing them back to health. Thomas was adventurous and fearless, constantly giving his parents heart attacks with his daring exploits. Beatrice proved to be a wonderful mother, patient and loving but also firm when necessary. She taught her children to read and write, to do sums, and to treat everyone with respect regardless of their background. She never hid her scars from them. Instead, she used them as teaching moments about survival and strength. When Peter was 6, he asked about his mother's scars for the first time. Beatrice sat him down and told him the story of the fire, age-appropriate but honest. Peter listened intently, then threw his arms around her neck. "I am glad you did not die, Mama," he said fiercely, "because then I would not be here." "That is right," Beatrice agreed, hugging him tight. "Everything that happened to me, even the hard things, led me to your papa and to you and your brother and sister. I would not change any of it." Preston watched this exchange from the doorway, his heart full. This woman, this incredible woman who had arrived on a stagecoach expecting rejection, had given him everything he could ever want. She had made his house a home, his life complete. When Beatrice was 35 and Preston was 39, they had one final child, a daughter they named Sarah Catherine, after the young woman who had helped them for so many years, and Helen Harrington's mother. Baby Sarah was a surprise, arriving 10 years after Thomas, but she was welcomed with joy by her older siblings who doted on her endlessly. By this time, Peter was 14 and already a skilled ranch hand, working alongside his father with confidence and competence. Eleanor, at 13, had discovered a talent for healing animals and apprenticed with the veterinarian who served the ranches around Tulsa. Thomas, at 12, was still getting into trouble but showing signs of settling down and developing an interest in breeding horses. The Double E Ranch had grown to over 1,000 acres, one of the largest and most prosperous in Indian Territory. When Oklahoma achieved statehood in 1907, Preston and Beatrice were there for the celebration in Guthrie. Their children gathered around them. "This land has been good to us," Preston said, watching the festivities. "I came here with nothing but a dream and a claim. Now look at what we have built." "We built it together," Beatrice reminded him, squeezing his hand. "All of it." As their children grew and eventually started families of their own, Preston and Beatrice settled into the comfortable rhythms of grandparenthood. They were still active on the ranch, still partners in every sense of the word, but they also enjoyed the slower pace that came with age. Peter married a schoolteacher from Tulsa and gave them 3 grandchildren. Eleanor married the veterinarian she had apprenticed with and had 2 children. Thomas found his calling in breeding horses, and built his own successful operation on land Preston deeded to him. Baby Sarah, who never quite lived up to her nickname as she grew tall and strong, married a lawyer and moved to Oklahoma City, though she visited often. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Preston and Beatrice sat together on the porch of the house that had grown and changed with their family. Their hair was gray now, their faces lined with age, but their love had only grown stronger over the decades. "You remember the day we met?" Preston asked, his arm around Beatrice's shoulders. "How could I forget? I was terrified that you would take one look at me and send me back to Missouri. Instead, I took one look at you and knew my life was about to change forever." Preston pressed a kiss to her scarred cheek, something he had done countless times over the years. "Best decision I ever made, placing that advertisement. Best decision I ever made, answering it," Beatrice agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had built a life on. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The cattle lowed softly, the horses whinnied in the barn, and somewhere Carlos was singing one of his Spanish songs. Everything they had worked for, everything they had built together, spread out before them. A legacy of love, hard work, and family that would continue long after they were gone. Preston took Beatrice's hand, the same hand he had taken that first day in the general store in Tulsa, and raised it to his lips. "I love you, Beatrice Everett, today, tomorrow, and for all the years we have left. And I love you, Preston Everett. Thank you for seeing past my scars and into my heart. Thank you for giving me a home, a family, a life I never dreamed possible." As the stars began to appear overhead, and a cool breeze brought relief from the day's heat, Preston and Beatrice remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms. The journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty had led to more joy than either had imagined possible. Beatrice had arrived in Tulsa expecting rejection, her heart heavy with loss and her face marked by tragedy. But Preston Everett had welcomed her with open arms, seeing not her scars but her strength, not her past but her potential. Together they had built something beautiful and lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. And as they sat together in the peaceful twilight of both the day and their lives, surrounded by the evidence of their love in every direction, they knew that their story was complete. Not because it was ending, but because every chapter had been exactly as it should be, every challenge overcome together, every joy shared and doubled because they had each other. The stagecoach that had brought Beatrice to Tulsa all those years ago had carried more than just a scarred woman seeking refuge. It had carried hope, courage, and the beginning of a love story that would span decades and generations. And that love, born from kindness and nurtured with patience, had transformed two lonely people into a family that would echo through the years to come. Their children and grandchildren would tell the story often in the years ahead, of the brave woman who answered an advertisement and the kind cowboy who saw her true worth. It became a family legend, a testament to the power of looking beyond the surface and the beauty of accepting someone exactly as they are. Preston and Beatrice lived many more happy years together, never taking a single day for granted. They watched their grandchildren grow, welcomed great-grandchildren, and celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by more family than they could have imagined that first day in Tulsa. When Preston finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Beatrice held his hand and whispered her gratitude for every moment they had shared. She followed him just 2 years later, dying in the house they had built together, surrounded by children and grandchildren who had been blessed by their love. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple headstones that bore their names, and a single inscription chosen by their children. Together always, from that first moment to the last. And the Double E Ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, a living testament to what could be built when two people chose to love courageously and completely, when they welcomed each other with open arms and open hearts, creating something beautiful from what others might have seen as broken. The love story of Preston and Beatrice Everett became exactly what all the best love stories should be. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real, lasting, and powerful enough to create a legacy that would never be forgotten.